that's a big part of why we encourage leaders to utilize the podcast and video. Podcast and TV are somewhat blending today, and the opportunity to get in front of their audience as an expert. And that audience, as exemplified by many CEOs that are now using podcasts, can be internal, meaning their employees. It can be partners. It can be prospects and customers. And they can really control that message in a format that allows them to very comfortably and conveniently share and communicate high-level messaging out to, but at the end of the day, it's whoever their targeted audience is.
Welcome to Season 4 of the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast with Nina Sunday, CSP, for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show helps you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
Karl Post is a co-founder of the C-Suite Network, home of the world's most trusted network of C-Suite leaders. Karl served as Vice President and Officer of an international franchise organisation operating 3 brands with over 900 locations in 23 countries. At Eastman Kodak, Karl worked in marketing and business development. A co-founder of the C-Suite Network, Karl Post is Head of Media and currently CEO of Tallgrass Public Relations. And I first met Karl Post at a C-Suite Network Thought Summit in the One World Trade Center, Manhattan, back in 2018 when I was a guest author at the summit, signing copies of my book, Workplace Wisdom for 9 to Thrive. Welcome, Karl Post.
Well, thank you, Nina. Such a pleasure to be with you today.
Yes, and well, look, I'm pretty excited having seen what Jeffrey Hayzlett's been talking about, encouraging CEOs to use the podcast medium as a way to get their message across, which is different to sort of maybe recording a meeting that they have with their teams and just saying, here's a replay of that meeting. There's the capacity to have a bit of production value and to elevate their personal brand. So I think you're going to talk to us about that today, Karl.
Happy to. I think that what we found, and so your listeners know, with C-Suite Radio, we host over 450 podcasts today. We've been in the podcasting business and TV business for a number of years. And what we like to tell business leaders now is podcasting is not just for influencers. It's a wonderful opportunity for you to build your personal brand, build the company's brand, and really, as was noted in a recent article by the Financial Times, control your message. And it's just a medium that's very friendly to your audience.
And, you know, I've featured in the last I've been doing my podcast for 5 years, Manage Self, Lead Others. In the last few years, I've contacted industry experts that have won awards for in the human resources area, and they're not influencers. They're just doing a role and that they've been acknowledged for. And some CEOs that who've invited me to do training with them, I've done episodes with them. So I already feature industry experts who just really talk about what they do, how they do it, and I think it really gives a level of authenticity to my podcast, but it gives a level of elevated presence and personal branding to them in person.
And that's a big part of why we encourage leaders to utilize the podcast and video. Podcast and TV are somewhat blending today, but we encourage them to use the distribution elements and the opportunity to get in front of their audience as an expert. And that audience, as exemplified by many CEOs that are now using podcasts, can be internal, meaning their employees. It can be partners. It can be prospects and customers. And they can really control that message in a format that allows them to very comfortably and conveniently share and communicate high-level messaging out to, but at the end of the day, it's whoever their targeted audience is.
If a CEO or any senior leader with the approval of the board and other senior leaders and the people around them that advise them, if they can actually be sending out to a wider audience a succinct message about vision, mission, goals, latest trajectories, good news stories, and good news stories about different people inside the organization that will uplift them as well and motivate those people and their colleagues. That really can have a beautiful ripple effect. Would you agree?
It starts with the brand of the CEO and what they're looking to accomplish. And then you integrate the valuable aspects of the company, the organization, the message, or even partnerships or organizations that they're working with all become part of that brand and part of that message. And it really allows them to get a little more personal with their target audience. But it starts with what they're most comfortable with, and it grows from there.
Yes, Carl. And it's about authenticity and have an opportunity to go deep.
It also allows them to develop an affinity for the brand, for the personality, for the product, for the service. And through that conversation, people learn and then they'll go to explore. We talk in terms of content is the king, activation is the queen, but context is the kingdom. And so often our exposure to leaders is through written correspondence and the transition of media to include more and more video, to include more and more high quality video, where it moves to the quality of broadcast television is an important part of what's happening in the marketplace. And so the opportunity to build that brand, to add that personal touch, to again bring authenticity to the message is just exposure that's very difficult to get in a large scale way through any other medium.
It is the future. Podcasts are the future, and they're not just the reign of. I know we've got some television stations here, or radio stations as well, that podcast their episodes, their shows. It's anybody can really do a podcast, and my question to you is, does it have to be in the public domain, or if you're working with, and we can talk shortly about how C-Suite Network works with CEOs and senior leaders to help them create their podcast. I think it's done for you and done with you options. Is there an option for keeping it sort of in-house so that only people with the link can access it, rather than if they just wanted it to be a communication to their wider employees and not something to the public domain?
There are various distribution methods for sharing your content in both an audio and video format. Traditionally, when we talk about podcasting, it's been made available on a public directory, I would call it, or a platform. Two of the largest would be Spotify and Apple.
Yeah.
If you publish that to the directory, then the term we use, it is then discoverable by the general public. But if you wanted to do something or to start crawl, walk, run, to crawl and start with communications internally and then evaluate the response, evaluate the format, and figure out exactly what you're trying to accomplish, then you can expand that. We always try and be strategic about the media-based efforts and planning in advance, having an editorial a plan are all kind of important parts about the strategic method of what are you trying to accomplish. Most often, you're supplementing other campaigns, other programs, other products and services. And so you want to step and repeat the primary messaging that you're trying to drive with the podcast. But you just to get to do it in a little bit of a different format. And I'll add one more kind of strategic thing that we like to talk about. It's always about reach, discovery, and conversion.
Yeah.
And so by reach, in a way, we're talking about distribution. How do you reach that audience? And that is one of the wonderful benefits of podcasting is that podcasting was built with a digital infrastructure in mind. When they developed TV, magazines, and a lot of other communication mediums, they weren't developed with digital in mind. So the infrastructure for a podcast, the distribution, the discovery, the industry and the platform was developed to facilitate that. And so you have reach, you have the ability to discover, you still have to tell people about it. And then you hope that when someone discovers and listens to your podcast or watches it, if you've done a video one, then they have a chance to convert depending on the message, the call to action. It might be initially just hey, let's download the next episode and stay with us as we carry on this conversation. Or there can be very direct calls to action within the podcasts, and they're very measurable.
And I've changed my call to action over the years. I started saying one thing and then I move on to another, and because what I offer the market evolves. I saw a live stream from a couple of months ago. It's still on LinkedIn, discoverable there. Your conversation with Jeffrey that you live streamed talked about a hyper-local strategy. So if you were just a local dry cleaner, you can be the doctor of spots. But your market is usually local. It's not national, or international. So how can you achieve that? How? Because I see podcasting as being very broad. How do you become a local expert?
The podcasting kind of framework and platform that's developed is worldwide. It's wherever I am with my phone and the app that I'm using to download and consume my content, whether audio or video. But you don't have to think of an international audience. That's my first favorite A word is audience. Let's think about who our audience is. And what's happening on the distribution side is fast channels that are targeted to a local audience. These are fast channels are on the digital spectrum. And think of them as they can be national, they can be international, but they can also be targeting a local audience. So if I'm going to take my podcast or my TV show and I want to reach Dayton, Ohio, I can specifically target an audience on the fast channel that was created, and they're already reaching to an audience in a hyperlocal format. So it's part of our strategy really over the next 12 months to 2 years as we look at the expansion of podcast and TV as a media platform for businesses to implement the hyperlocal strategy.
I noticed that it's geo-organized. In other words, in Australia, when I listen to it, it's an Australian ad about Australian products or service. So I can only imagine that if someone's listening to it in Africa, it'll be some African ad or some global product, or similarly for USA and Europe, etc. So you've got it geo-positioned with your advertising. And so what you're suggesting is as new people come on board, if they want a hyper-local strategy and really create more community, well, then they can have more commerce within their own community.
It comes back to the fact that podcasting as a platform was designed for digital. And so the flexibility with what you do within the platform to monetize that podcast, if you choose, you don't have to run ads in your podcast, but many do. And if you choose, the digital platform allows you to actually do ad insertions. And if you are hyperlocally focusing your podcast, you can hyperlocal the advertisers who are also trying to reach the same audience. So for the same reason you want your podcast on someone's local fast channel, it's all about getting access to that local audience, building content that's relevant to that local audience, and then hoping to give them a message which they might convert on. Most common is to do what's called a pre-roll, mid-roll, and post-roll ad, have 3 ad insertions into your content. And then you can actually have 3 ads per episode. And the way the monetization works, you get paid if they listen to that ad. So the listener has to stay through the ad in order to get paid. So should you choose to include monetization in your podcast, ensuring and creating interesting and compelling content within your 24-minute or 48-minute episode will ensure that you get compensated, that someone actually listens to the advertisement.
I'm going to ask you shortly about what C-suite network is doing if a CEO does want to start a podcast. But there's one point that was brought up in the live stream that I saw, which was that C-suite network has identified 40 verticals. Can you explain what the 40 verticals are, please? Maybe not all 40, but some of them.
Yeah, well, I think it comes back to our strategy. And in North America, again, recognizing you have an international audience, but our emphasis today with our strategies in North America, we do have many podcasts from around the world on C-Suite Radio, but there are 650,000 business podcasts in North America. So
Right.
650,000 businesses have already made the decision that this is a platform for them to utilize. Yet there's over 37 million businesses in North America. So when you look at the curve of adoption, we're still very early. And I think that that is in part because hyperlocal businesses haven't decided to do it. The small businesses in a Columbus, Ohio, in Salt Lake City, various markets around the US, they're thinking broad international reach. And when we bring this message of hyperlocal to them, we're identifying businesses in that market that primarily do business in that market. So we're looking at the leading CPA firms, the leading law firms, health and wellness, the leading plastic surgeon, the leading recruitment firms, B2B insurance, consumer insurance. And when you think about that, there are local leaders who have been doing business in those markets for long, extended periods of time. And we want to help them take that presence, that brand that they've developed, and utilize the podcast and or TV and video medium to allow them to communicate and extend that conversation they've been having with their local brick and mortar, with their website, with their employees in the community. And now we're really going to extend that reach with another medium utilizing the podcasting format.
All right. Well, our message to the listeners and the viewers is don't think about it, just start because you can only get better. Now, how can C-Suite Network help somebody get started?
Well, thank you for that, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with your listeners. We have a range of programs available, and they're available if you're an existing podcaster. We have a wonderful value proposition that if you would like us to host your podcast, we become a channel partner. We promote your podcast. Nina, I think you mentioned earlier in our program here that you saw increased listenership when you associated with the C-Suite network. It's something that you shouldn't go and do on your own. Be part of a network, be part of a community. We actually say, don't be out in podcast purgatory by yourself. So we have a range of ways in which we will help promote, raise awareness, and drive downloads for your podcast if you're an existing podcaster. If you're a brand new podcaster thinking about getting started, we have our launch program. We have a launch program that will take you from A to Z with all the things you need to launch your podcast. This includes creative for artwork, for displaying your podcast. This includes music selection. This includes recording what we call the intro and outro or exit from your show. It's the beginning and end, and you put each episode in the middle. It includes 3 personalized coaching sessions to help you build the editorial calendar. It includes filming a practice episode. It includes filming your first 5-minute episode, which is episode 1 of your podcast, usually about 5 minutes, that announces, I'm here. Here's my podcast. Here's what it's about. And then we put you on all the directories. So we're on the Spotify, Megaphone, or Spawn platform. They publish out to over 1,600 directories. So no matter where your audience might listen to their podcasts, we can actually put you on that directory and publish your podcast. So it's back to my D word, discoverable. So that when someone searches your name, the title of your podcast, your industry, that your podcast is actually discoverable on the directory. And so we bundle all of that into a launch package for anyone who wants to start. And then we actually offer production resources. And you alluded to this earlier. We have this model where you are more than welcome to do it yourselves. We have some talented people in our community who edit and manage their own episodes, and they do it very well. Or they might find local talent and support or have an employee who can handle the production aspects of their podcast. Or we can do it with you. We've got a lot of resources where we can help out in some areas. or we can actually do it for you. And we have production resources where we can actually help you and put together a customized program for you based on the number of episodes you want to do in a month or year. And our team will handle all the production. We talk about letting you be the talent. You just come hit the mark. And we have production resources up to and including having an executive producer in the room with you during your interview. So Nina, if we had a producer, the producer would actually be in the room monitoring our interview, capturing live time edits, things that we might want to correct, remind us that we missed that question that I was mentioning earlier, and just keep the interview on track. But at the end of the day, we want the talent, the podcast host, to be able to hit the mark. They're responsible for the content, and they're responsible for creating a compelling interview that people will want to listen to. So a wide range of offerings from the C-Suite network to help anyone who's interested in podcasting.
Well, that sounds pretty supportive. And I think anybody listening, if they wanted to find out more, is there an email address or a website they can go to, please, Karl?
Yes, they can go to cc-suitenetwork.com. That's our primary website. And if they'd like to reach out directly to me, it's karl.post@hayzlett.com. KARL.POST@HAYZLETT.com. I look forward to hearing from anyone who's interested.
And I'll be putting that in the show notes, and mention that you listened to this episode. It's always nice to know who's been listening. All right, thank you so much, Karl Post. I know you have an amazing schedule, so thank you for creating the time today. I appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here, Nina, and we'll talk again soon.
This episode, we were speaking with Karl Post, co-founder of C-Suite Network, all about how to get started with your own podcast, especially if you're a senior leader, a CEO, wanting to elevate your presence, amplify your message, and communicate either with your colleagues, your employees and company, but also with the wider community. And the reach and the distribution is your choice. So contact C-Suite Network. The links are in the show notes. And my name is Nina Sunday. I placed my podcast on the C-Suite radio network back in 2020, and it was a really wise decision because I've had a lot of support, and it's grown. It's now in the top 5% globally of all the podcasts in the world. I put that down to being on a distribution network such as C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. So thank you for listening. Bye for now. And if you know anybody that you think might benefit by getting started with podcasting, do it now rather than in 3 years' time. It's still a competitive advantage to do a podcast these days. You are an early adapter if you get started now. And in 3 years' time, you will be amazed at how easy, streamlined, standardized the whole process is, and you can just fit it into a busy week, which like I do. All the best. Bye for now. Until next time. This is Nina Sunday signing off.
Nina Sunday CSP is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. Nina Sunday travels from Brisbane, Australia to facilitate half-day or full-day workshops at your location anywhere across Australia. For a list of Nina's topics around leading people, productivity and communication, go to brainpowertraining.com.au/signature programs to request a tailored proposal. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference in Australia, New Zealand, Asia or internationally, head to ninasunday.com for details.